Greetings from our Temecula studios. This is the Ryder Report. I'm Ryder Bullock. Fifth-ranked Duke Blue Devils stay unbeaten, now 5-0 after a 78-66 win over number 24 Kansas. This was a matchup that promised star power, tempo, and physicality. And for most of the night, Duke delivered just a little more of each. Kansas falls to 3-2. And while they hung around, particularly behind the play of sophomore guard White, the Jayhawks could never fully erase the early deficit they spent the night chasing. Let's walk you through how this game unfolded. Duke set the tone early, leading by 8 at the break, 41-33, and maintaining control throughout the second half. Their advantage on the glass was decisive, 41-30 overall, including 13 offensive rebounds that turned into critical second-chance points. Kansas matched Duke in turnovers, each with 8, but the Blue Devils' ability to reset and wear Kansas down proved to be the separating factor. Star performers for Kansas, it was White. He was outstanding, 22 points, knocking down 7 of his 13 shots and going 6 for 7 at the line. Without his scoring stretches, this game could have gotten out of hand much earlier. For Duke, it was the star freshman Cameron Boozer who showed why he's a projected top 3 pick, my number 1 pick in this year's NBA draft. He finished with 18 points, hitting key buckets in the second half, going 3 for 5 in the stripe. While not his most efficient night, his presence drew defenders open passing lanes and allowed Duke's balanced attack to shine. Team comparison, Kansas shot a respectable 43% from the field, but their struggles came from deep, just 4 of 21, a cold 19%. Meanwhile, Duke wasn't blazing from outside either, 27%, but they hit 3 more threes. And going to the free throw line more often, 26 attempts to Kansas' 14. The Jayhawks actually outscored Duke in the paint, if you believe that, 40-38, and had more fast break points. But in the margins, the rebounds, the second chance opportunities, and Duke's timely makes, the Blue Devils built a cushion that Kansas never threatened down the stretch. Final thoughts in the championship classic. Duke looked every bit like a veteran poised group ready to contend deep into March, showing balance, discipline, and physicality. Kansas showed flashes of that, especially through White, but they'll leave the Garden knowing they need more perimeter consistency and a strong presence on the boards. Final score once again from Madison Square Garden, Duke 78, Kansas 66. Once again, this is the Ryder Report. I'm Ryder Bullock. So glad you are with us. Earlier tonight, Michigan State arrived at Madison Square Garden Tuesday night, shooting just 21% from the three-point range through its first 3 games, and then proceeded to rewrite the script. The 17th-ranked Spartans knocked down a season-high 11 three-pointers and rolled that sudden long-range surge to an 83-66 win over number 12 Kentucky in the Champions Classic opener. Kerr Tang, who hit only 1 3 all season entering the night, contended on the three triples and scored a career-best 15. Jackson Kohler was the steadying force, finishing with 20 points, including a pair from deep. Trey Fort added 13, but this was more than a hot shooting. Michigan State dominated the glass, out-rebounding Kentucky 42-28, and controlled the paint in a way that looked far more familiar to anyone who has watched Tom Izzo coach for nearly 3 decades. Tang's corner fadeaway at the horn sent MSU into halftime up double digits, and the Spartans never allowed the lead to shrink below 10 the rest of the way. Cohen Carr proved his usual highlight reel moment with an alley-oop dunk early in the second half, and from there, Michigan State steadily pushed the lead past 20. Kentucky, which opened the game with a quick 5-0 burst, went ice cold soon after. The Wildcats shot just 8 for 29 in the first half and dropped their second game in 3 outings. Otega Owe led Kentucky with 12, while Denzel Arbadine, Colin Chandler, and New York native Muhammad Diabonte each scored 10. Kentucky point guard Jalen Lowe missed his 5th straight game with a shoulder injury. Up next, Michigan State hosts Detroit Mercy on Friday. Kentucky returns home to face Loyola, Maryland. North Carolina hasn't left home yet this season, and they haven't lost either behind a breakout night from freshman star Caleb Wilson. Number 18, North Carolina improved to 5-0, knocking off Navy 73-61 in Chapel Hill. Wilson delivered 23 points, 12 rebounds, 4 steals, and 3 blocks, a stat line worthy of a veteran, not a first year. Luka Bogovic added 16 for the Tar Heels, while Jarian Stevenson and Henry Vassar scored 11 and 10. The Tar Heels led wire to wire, though Navy twice threatened. A Donovan Draper layup cut the UNC lead to 3 midway through the first half, but Carolina responded with a 14-5 run. Early in the second, the midshipmen got within 4, only to be met by a decisive 24-7 UNC surge, punctuated by not 1, not 2, but 3 electric breakaway dunks from Wilson. Navy, despite returning nearly 87% of last year's scoring, managed just 30% shooting, becoming UNC's 4th opponent to fall below 40% on the season. Under Hubert Davis, the Tar Heels are now 49-4 when holding teams under that mark. And with this win, North Carolina becomes just the 3rd program ever to reach 2,400 victories, joining Kentucky and Kansas. This was the final game of the Heels' longest season opening homestand since 1918. They won't return to the Smith Center until December 7th. Up next for North Carolina, they head to Fort Myers for the Fort Myers tip-off to face St. Bonaventure next Tuesday. Navy returns to host NJIT on Saturday. So that was college basketball, and in the middle of all that, there was a CFP Top 25 bracket and rankings reveal, and we're going to put the rankings up on the screen so you can take a look at them. So Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Georgia, the top 4. And really, you know, you look at this, and there's plenty of controversy baked into this one. Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, they hold firm at the top. But the headline, Alabama, after losing to Oklahoma in Tuscaloosa, falls 6 spots to number 10. 6 spots. And now they're sitting behind Notre Dame. And that's where the fireworks start. Ohio State at 1, Indiana at 2, Texas A&M at 3. No arguments there. All undefeated, all controlling their destiny. Georgia slides up to 4, Texas Tech at 5, Ole Miss 6, Oregon 7, Oklahoma 8. That's your top 8. And then you hit Notre Dame at 9, Alabama 10. So that's the committee saying we value Notre Dame's resume more than Alabama's head-to-head wins. Okay, BYU, Miami round out 11 through 13. Miami fans are screaming. They beat Notre Dame head-to-head. Both teams are 8-2, yet Notre Dame sits 4 spots higher. That's the kind of inconsistency that drives people nuts. So let's talk Alabama for a minute. 4 wins against ranked teams. Notre Dame 1. Yet the Irish are ahead. Why? Because the committee is punishing Miami for losing to Louisville and Southern Methodist, unranked teams, while rewarding Notre Dame for quality losses. Because who did Notre Dame lose to? Well, they lost to Texas A&M, right here, and they lost to Miami, right here. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so Mario Cristobal said it best. Head-to-head should be number 1 criteria. Miami beat Notre Dame, period. But the committee chair, Hunter Yurkacek, says they haven't compared those teams yet. What do you mean you haven't compared them? What does that mean? You watched them play. It's November. Compare them. Anyway, SEC dominance, 9 teams in the top 25. Big 10 has 6. Big 12 has 5, with Arizona State coming in there. ACC has 3. That's balanced, but the SEC's depth is overwhelming. You know, you look at Alabama right here. They're 10th. They have a 71% chance to make the SEC title game. Beat Auburn in the Iron Bowl. They're in. You know, they're in Atlanta. Okay, in the SEC title game. All they got to do is beat Auburn, okay, who's not ranked, and they're in the SEC title game, okay, to play Texas A&M. So there you go. And then you got Georgia sitting at 4. But remember, they lost to Alabama earlier. Texas A&M controls its destiny, beat Texas next week, and they're in. In the Big Ten, Ohio State and Indiana are cruising, but USC at 15 right here. This is interesting, okay, especially because USC has to play Oregon on Saturday, okay, and then also we have Ohio State and Michigan in 2 weeks. Now, I said this way back when Oregon played Penn State. When Oregon played Penn State, I said, you know who loves this? You know who loves this is Michigan. Okay, Michigan says, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to watch all of you guys take each other out. Okay, they watched Oregon knock off Penn State. They watched Indiana knock off Oregon. And now they're going to watch USC and Oregon go toe-to-toe, and it's just going to bump Michigan up. Okay? And then Michigan will play Ohio State, and they control their destiny. Now, I say all that, and then I watched Saturday, and I watched Michigan need a game-winning field goal to beat a terrible Northwestern team. That can't happen in 2 weeks. If you want to beat Ohio State, you can't rely on your kicker. You got to figure that out now, okay? So Michigan, you're hanging on by a thread, and if you beat Ohio State, then Ohio State's out of the Big Ten championship. Probably not out of the playoff, but they're out of the Big Ten championship. Indiana would play Oregon or USC, the winner of this game. Right now it would be Oregon. Oregon has the tiebreaker, but if USC knocks Oregon off, USC's in there. So that's interesting there. Okay, so USC at 15, Oregon at 7, and they play each other this week. That's a monster. Winner's alive, the loser is out. So now I want to go to the bracket. So this is the college football bracket based on the current rankings. And you got Tulane at Texas A&M, or Tulane at Texas Tech, Miami at Ole Miss, Alabama at Oregon, Notre Dame at Oklahoma. That's your first round. Then the top 4, Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Georgia, they get the bye. Let me tell you, Alabama at Oregon, that's a heavyweight matchup. Notre Dame at Oklahoma, that's a ratings bonanza. Miami at Ole Miss, that's a prove-it game for Cristobal. Tulane at Tech, that's a group of 5 dream shot. So, the committee's job here is to reward the best resumes. But fans want fairness. Head-to-head matters. Alabama's resume matters. Miami's frustration matters. And we're still 2 weeks away from conference championships. Everything can change. For all we know, Purdue could beat Indiana. I don't think that's going to happen, but it could. Purdue has this weird thing about knocking off top 5 teams. And they would love nothing more than to win the old Oaken Bucket and knock off the number 2 team in the nation. They would love it. I don't think it's going to happen, but anything's possible. So a couple weeks, everything can change. Everything can change. But right now the committee has set the table for chaos. And folks, chaos is what makes college football the best sport in America. So, I want to break this down by conference, because if you want to understand the playoff picture, you've got to look at who's in, who's out, and who's hanging by a thread. And the SEC, once again, the center of the storm. Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, they're all in. That's 5 teams. Okay? Now, the last team in's Alabama. The Tide are hanging on at number 10. That loss to Oklahoma didn't knock them out, but it put them in must-win mode. They've got Auburn in the Iron Bowl, and if they lose that game, forget it, they're out. Now, go back to the top 25. First team out of the playoff in the SEC is Vanderbilt, right here at 14. Okay, so they're hanging. They're a nice story, but let's be honest. They need chaos. Okay, they need Alabama to lose. They need Miami to lose. They need BYU to lose. They need people ahead of them to lose. Okay, and I don't think that's going to happen. Okay, so the door's cracked, but barely. They're still in the mix, okay? And I would say Arkansas is out. Auburn, Florida, Kentucky, LSU, Mississippi State, Missouri, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, they're all out. Okay, they're done. No, Texas here at 17, Tennessee at 20. The other teams I mentioned, Missouri, they don't have a shot. They're done. Don't even worry about it. Big Ten, okay? Now you go back to the Big Ten here. Indiana's in. We know that. Ohio State's in. Oregon, okay, is the last team in. But they're shaky, right? Their strength of schedule is number 31. They've got a double-digit loss to Indiana, and if they lose to USC next week, okay, or this week, Saturday, then they're out. And the Trojans are right there. The Trojans could be in the playoff. And then you got Michigan. Okay, now USC beat Michigan. Okay, you remember that. USC beat Michigan. But I think if Michigan can beat Ohio State, and it's a big if, I think you got to reward that. I think you got to reward that. Because remember, Ohio State knocked off Texas at the beginning of the year. That's what made them number one. Now, I'm not saying Michigan should be number one, but I think if you beat the number one team in the nation, you should get some respect there. So Michigan's hanging in by a thread. They've only got a 3.6 chance to reach the Big Ten title game. But I think especially if USC beats Oregon, okay, and then if Michigan beats Ohio State, then it's Michigan and USC. USC, I think, has the tiebreak there in the Big Ten title game to play Indiana. So I don't know. They've got a 3.6 chance, though, to make the Big Ten title game. But if they beat Ohio State, that's the kind of win that changes everything. So out of the rest, Illinois, Iowa, Penn State, Wisconsin, they're all gone. So there you go. Texas Tech, we go back to the bracket here. Texas Tech at 5. They're the Big 12 team. And they would, 5's an interesting spot. It might be the best spot on the bracket. I don't know, because you get a home game there. And you have to play the group of 5 teams. So nothing against Tulane, but they're not the best team on this list. And that's but I'm glad they're there. Group of 5. We need a group of 5 team. Excuse me, but I'm just saying 5 might be the best spot. Maybe I could be wrong on that, but we'll see. But they're sitting at first round bye. Best chance to win the Big 12 at nearly 70%. They've got a bye this week, then West Virginia, so they're in control. First team out is BYU here at 11. And then you got Utah. But I want to focus on BYU for a minute. The Cougars are right there. If they win the league, okay, because they're going to play Texas Tech in the Big 12 title game. So they're right there. Okay. And if they can win the league, they're in. If they lose, forget about it. The committee's not giving them an at-large. Okay. Now, still in the mix, believe it or not, is Arizona State. Arizona State's 3rd in the Big 12. So, if, BYU stumbles, Utah stumbles, Arizona State's right there. And if Arizona State can repeat as Big 12 champions, and it's a big if, I know, they're still in the mix. Cincinnati, Utah, they're still alive. Utah's right there. Cincinnati's not ranked, so their margin's kind of small, but still an opportunity. They're not eliminated from Big 12 contention. So, but reality here is that this is Texas Tech's league to lose. ACC, you got Miami sitting there, and the Canes are the committee's highest-ranked ACC team at 13. But let's be honest, They've only got a 7% chance to reach the title game. They need help everywhere. They need Alabama to lose, BYU to lose, Utah to lose, and they need to win out. Okay? First, they just do. You know, they need some help here. First team out's Georgia Tech, and they're a win away from the ACC title game, but unless they beat Georgia on rivalry week, they're not sniffing the playoff. Still in the mix, Virginia, Duke, SMU, Pitt. Virginia's got the best shot at the title game, but none of these are locks. The ACC's a mess right now. Okay? Then Independence, Notre Dame at 9. There's ahead of Alabama. And, folks, that's the eye test. Okay? And strength of schedule. Jeremiah Love and Price, you can put either one of them on a Heisman ballot, and I wouldn't be upset. You put both of them on a Heisman ballot, I wouldn't be upset. They passed the eye test. Strength of schedule, they went out on a limb. Okay? They went out on a limb and scheduled Texas Tech week 2 and Miami week 1. Miami was on the road. Texas Tech was at home because they played Texas A&M was at home, but because they played Texas A&M last year on the road. So don't tell me I don't want to talk about I don't want to talk about Notre Dame's strength of schedule when Alabama's playing Citadel. I just don't. Now, Alabama is at number 4. Okay, but the committee loves Notre Dame. And you say, well, why? They're biased. No, I just told you why. Okay? Now Notre Dame beats Syracuse. Okay, they got to beat Syracuse on Saturday, and they got to beat Stanford, and then they're in. They're done. 10-2. Perfect. Check mark. Okay. Group of 5, Tulane right now, right? We got Tulane sitting there, and this group of 5 mix is so fascinating. The Green Wave are the top group of 5. You know, decent wins, better resume than James Madison, North Texas. Now, they're still in the mix. I like Navy. I think Navy might be a little better than Tulane, but I'm biased there. So, you know, we'll see. But Tulane's the team right now because Memphis fell off, and that's that. So here's the picture. SEC's loaded. Big Ten has 2 locks and 1 shaky. Big 12 is Texas Tech to lose. ACC's hanging by a thread. Notre Dame is Notre Dame, and Tulane's your group of 5 darling. Alabama is the hinge point. If they win out, they're in. So got a couple more games, right? Got the Iron Bowl, SEC title game, and some others there. So if they win out, they're in. They lose, chaos erupts. And, folks, that's what makes the playoff chase so compelling. Is this bracket here means absolutely nothing because a lot of stuff is going to happen, especially if these two meet, Indiana and Ohio State. If these two meet in the Big Ten championship, goodness gracious. If Ohio State loses to Michigan, goodness gracious. If USC beats Oregon, goodness gracious, and on we go. So that's why we watch, and that's why we love this, and that's why we sit here and we debate and we talk and everything else. So, and we could sit here and talk about it for hours on end, but we don't have hours on end. We need to get moving on. And we got to get to this Jamar Chase story. And we talked about this briefly on NFL Hot Topics with Albert Lanier. And the story is as simple as it gets. And I don't know why everybody's trying to turn it into Shakespeare. First of all, spitting in 2025 in the NFL with 30 cameras on you at all times. You think you're going to get away with that? Please. Not in this league. Not with the way everything's mic'd, filmed, replayed, zoomed, slowed down, aggravated, and blasted on social media before the next commercial break. Now, listen, people are already calling me saying, Ryder, it wasn't conclusive. It wasn't conclusive. Ramsey threw the punch, you know. Refs threw out the wrong guy. Stop. We got the video. Okay, I've seen the video. I'm not going to play the video, but I've seen it. WXIX in Cincinnati, clear as day. You see Chase spit in Ramsey's direction, and if that happens, I don't want to hear about it. Okay, internet, Facebook, X, I don't want to hear about it. I don't care. Okay, I don't want to hear about the heat of the moment. You do that, you're getting suspended. And especially, hey, listen, especially when it happened opening night. He got suspended. And we had Albert Lanier on here last night, and he said if this continues, the NFL is going to have to up the ante on the punishments, and I agree, because you do that, you're getting suspended. That's the rule. That's sportsmanship. Page 1, paragraph 1. And listen, the appeal goes to Judy, Nelson or whatever. And let me tell you, Judy Nelson's not just some hatchet man. He's as straight-laced as they come. And if Nelson looks at the tape and says, yeah, this is a suspension, well, guess what? It's a suspension. Chase loses $448,000 for the week, loses another $58,000 in bonuses. I don't care how much money you make. That one's going to sting. And what really gets me is this. Chase denied it. Said he didn't spin on Ramsey. Well, Jamar, you're on candid camera, and the camera says otherwise. And before anyone says Ryder Ramsey threw a punch, yeah, he did. And he got tossed. That's the rule, too. But the refs didn't catch the spit in real time. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Doesn't mean the league can't handle it retroactively, catch it on the back end. They do it every week. And this whole we didn't see anything that rose to that level from Bill Vinovich, come on. Of course they didn't. These guys can barely spot a hole at full speed. They're not seeing a spit from the 10-yard line. They're 10 yards away in the middle of a scrum. Get out of here. You're not seeing that. So bottom line is this. Chase is out against the Patriots. He learned his lesson. He earned that suspension. And you know what? If you want to be a superstar in this league, and Chase is by every definition, you've got to be smarter. You can't put your team in this spot. You can't give the league something easy to call. Okay? And I agree with Albert Lanier. The NFL, if this becomes a problem, because this is, I think, the second time it's happened, well, to my knowledge, if not more, they're going to have to do something more than just one game. Okay? Because like he said, and I agree, if you do it, if I did it to somebody outside the studio here, it's assault. I'd go to jail. So, Chase, you gotta keep your temper. Read Sportsmanship 101 while you're suspended here. Let's get into the NBA. Steve Kerr is very concerned about soft tissue injuries because of pace and the schedule. Okay, fine. But let me tell you something right off the top. I completely, absolutely, 100% disagree with him on the root of this. First of all, this idea that the pace is somehow new. That today's players are doing something unprecedented in terms of miles and speed. Stop. Just stop. You want to tell me they're running faster? Sure. Analytics will tell you that. But here's the part everybody ignores. The players today don't practice. They don't have two-a-days. They don't do the physical conditioning the older generation did. They take more maintenance days than any era in NBA history. There's more sports science, more monitoring, more restrictions on workload. Coaches are limited on practice time by the CBA. The whole league is built around rest. And you're telling me they're breaking down because they're working too hard? Nonsense. Absolutely nonsense. The biggest difference between the 1980s and 2020s is stopping and starting. Explosive movements. These guys aren't grinding. They're bursting. That's where the soft tissue comes from. It's not volume, it's explosiveness. But here's the other thing I disagree with Kerr on. The 82-game schedule is not the problem. The schedule has been the same since 1960. Wilt played 48 minutes a night. Jordan played 82 every year. Kobe wanted to play 82. Karl Malone played 80-plus for a decade. So what's the difference? It's training styles, body types. players specializing too young. AAU grind before you're physically ready. The obsession with vertical explosion over strength. Giannis isn't getting hurt because the league plays too many games. He's getting hurt because he's 6'11", 250, and moves like a sprinter on a track meet. Wembanyama isn't fragile because of schedule density. He's a 7'4" unicorn with a muscle density that hasn't caught up to his frame yet. And Kerr stands up there and says they haven't had a single practice on the road trip. Well, Steve, that's the point. You can't practice because the sports scientists, the same people empowered by the league, won't let you. Everybody's terrified of overworking players, and because of that, you have a lot of very talented athletes who aren't functioning conditioned to the NBA grind. That's not the league's fault. That's the organizational philosophy. Then Kerr talks about cutting games to 72. Well, let me be the first one to say this. The owners are never giving up 10 games on revenue, ever. And the players aren't giving up 10% of their salary. The networks aren't giving up 10% of inventory. End of discussion. So this whole we need fewer games argument, you're better off going to Disneyland, Fantasy Island. It's a talking point. It never happens unless every stakeholder suddenly becomes a charity. And like Kerr said, in 2025 in America, not happening. Now listen, I like Steve Kerr, smart guy, great coach, great spokesman for the league. Did a great job coaching the 2024 men's team to a gold medal, but on this one he's wrong. This is not about pace. It's not about scheduling. It's not about back-to-backs. This is about modern athletes being built for highlight reels instead of durability. And that's a developmental problem, not an NBA calendar problem. Just saying. Here's what's trending in sports. Let's start with U.S. soccer, where a young American squad delivered its most eye-opening result of the year at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa. The United States men's national team playing without Christian Pulisic, Winston McKennie, and Tyler Adams and Antoine Robinson dominated Uruguay 5-1 in a friendly that looked anything but friendly. Sebastian Berhalter jump-started the scoring with a blistering strike off a set piece, giving the Americans an early and unexpected lead. 10 minutes later, 20-year-old Alex Freeman announced himself with authority, raising for a towering header that beat Christopher Furman for his first senior national team goal. Freeman stayed busy. Just moments later, he sliced through the Uruguayan backline, keeping his balance and driving home a point-blank finish to make it 3-0. Then came goal number 4. Diego Luna polished off a smooth team move down the left side, sweeping in a first-time shot that sent the crowd in Tampa into a frenzy. Uruguay finally responded just before halftime with a spectacular overhead kick from Georgian D. Asandra, a goal that visibly irritated U.S. manager Paul Chicento, who told the TNT team they needed to control the emotions and control the second half. The Americans did just that after a straight red card to Rodrigo Benitacarte left Uruguay down a man second-half substitution. Gio Reyna set up Tanner Tessman for the Americans' fifth. The 5-1 result is historic. It's the first time the United States has ever scored 5 goals against a former World Cup champion or any South American opponent. It caps a 5-match unbeaten run as the U.S. moves closer to next year's World Cup on home soil. To college football now, where Deion Sanders is pushing back on speculation about his future at Colorado. With the Buffaloes sitting at 3-7 and headed for a second losing season in 3 years, Sanders was firm today. He believes he's still the right man for the job. "You've got the right man," he said. "Give me time, and I'll prove it to you." Sanders has navigated a challenging year that included a cancer diagnosis this spring and major roster adjustments he now admits weren't all successful. Meanwhile, athletic director Rick George, who hired Sanders and will step down at the end of the academic year, publicly backed his head coach, insisting the seat is not hot. Sanders is 16-9 overall at Colorado and signed through 2029. Says he plans to fix what he calls self-inflicted issues inside the program. And finally, the NFL, where there's happy news off the field for Baker Mayfield and his family. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback and his wife, Emily, announced they're expecting their second child, a baby boy, due in April of 2026. The couple made their reveal with a cake-cutting photo shoot showing blue coloring inside the slice. Their daughter, Kova Jade, was born in 2024. Baker laughed about the realities of parenting, admitting the dirty diapers are not my specialty, but he says they're thrilled to grow their family as Tampa Bay continues its playoff push. That's what's trending in sports. Here is tonight's final thought. Tonight, a labor story worth your attention, and perhaps long overdue. The WNBA and its players are once again at the negotiating table, and for once the numbers being discussed don't sound like loose change compared to their male counterparts. According to details confirmed this week, the league's latest collective bargaining proposal would offer something that has eluded women's professional basketball for decades: a real share of the pie. We're talking about a maximum salary north of $1.1 million available to multiple players per team, a league minimum climbing above $220,000, and an average salary over $460,000. More than 180 players would feel that impact immediately, with room to grow each year. If you've followed the WNBA's history, you know how significant that is. It wasn't long ago that top players were spending winters overseas, not for competition, but for survival. They chased paychecks in Russia and Turkey because the league at home couldn't or wouldn't meet the market their talents created. Players opted out of the last CBA hoping for three things: true revenue sharing, real salary increases, and dignity in benefits and structure. In 2019, the league extended negotiations for 60 days and produced a deal. This time, they've pushed the deadline from October 31st to November 30th, hoping to reach something that doesn't just tweak the system, but transforms it. The question now isn't whether the women have earned these gains on the court, at the box office, and in cultural relevance. That answer is obvious. The real question is whether the league, its governors, its partners, its leadership, are willing to match the players' ambition with their own. Because for the WNBA, this moment isn't just about money. It's about value. And whether, after all these years, the league is finally ready to treat its stars like the stars they are. That'll do it for me on this Tuesday night. Till next time, Ryder Bullock reporting. Thank you for your time, and thank you for letting me share mine.